Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is a special one-on-one interview. I am joined by Matt Slater, who is the senior football news reporter for The Athletic, and we are here to talk about Jim Ratcliffe, Ineos, and the potential takeover of Manchester United. Who is he? What would he bring to United? What has he done at Nice? Just all of it. Basically, if you're thinking, oh, well, who is this guy? I don't know much about Jim Ratcliffe. Well, you're about to find out. Matt, you wrote a brilliant article in The Athletic about Jim Ratcliffe, his history, what he's done in recent years, investing in sports groups, and sort of, I think you're the perfect person to talk about this. So first of all, thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Great. And secondly, I mean, obviously we'll go into a bit more detail, but who is Jim Radcliffe? Like, what is his interest in Manchester United? Do you believe it's genuine? And you know, what could he sort of bring to United that maybe the Glazers haven't, or you know, certainly that United fans are looking for?
Well, there's a lot in that question, so I'll try and break it down a little bit. I will try and answer all of those. So who is he? Well, he's a very successful businessman. He's if not the richest, he's one of the richest men in Britain and has been for a while. The source of that wealth is his company, Ineos. They are, I think, the fourth largest petrochemicals company in the world. They're quite an unusual firm. They're kind of a conglomerate. He, in the 90s, started buying various businesses and bolting them together. Refineries, plastics companies, solvents. His stuff appears in medicines, construction, you name it, really. It's a very interesting company. I mean, if you're interested in that sort of thing. Grangemouth is a big refinery in Scotland. That's one of his biggest plants. He's got another big refinery, I think, in France. They employ about 25, 30,000 people. It's huge. And it's one of those companies that their stuff kind of does appear everywhere. You know, toothpaste, medicine, I've mentioned a few, hand sanitizers, but they're not a high street brand. It's perfectly normal and acceptable if you've never heard of them at all and have no concept of what they are. That's fine. It's building block stuff, but it's profitable. It's very profitable. It can be a little bit controversial because you're talking about pollutants and you're talking about old-fashioned industry. So if you don't have to spend much time on Google to find Ineos controversies, but equally they make useful, important stuff that we use every day. They have a relatively good reputation for innovation and paying decent wages. They've got an interesting story to tell around tax, but that. There's every large global corporation in the world has a story to tell around tax. Intriguing guy, humble background from Failsworth, Oldham. Very sort of regular bloke, very bright. Started off in finance, but clearly he always had this sort of scientific element, to what he was interested in. Be a self-made man. There's a lot of this story, the Radcliffe story, that is really good. It's a good positive story. A Brit who has built a company out of unwanted and failing bits of other companies. He picked them up, a lot of these businesses, for a good price. He's obviously got an eye for value. He's obviously got an eye for good management, because when he buys a business, historically he did a lot of his buying through the 90s. Into the noughties. The last 15 years, it's really about sort of running these companies well. So, from a business point of view, there's a lot we could say. I don't think that's very interesting, though, to football fans. So the more interesting bit for football fans is that this guy's also a sports nut, genuine sports nut, a bit of an adventurer. And the first sort of stuff he was doing around sport was investing in a kind of early version of park run, encouraging kids at schools to run regularly. And he's very into fitness. And then the very first football, the very first sports business he bought was in Lausanne Sport, which were at the time were a second tier Swiss team. There was a reason, Ineos were based in Lausanne at the time. They had a lot of their company, their HQ, I think, was in Switzerland at the time. He's actually since moved it to London. So it's not always that he's moving out of the UK. He actually moved the headquarters to London. He's personally moved his tax status to Monaco, which is why sometimes there's a little comment around that. So, so Lausanne, and then since then, Nice is probably the most famous example. He's bought a club in Abidjan in the Ivory Coast as well. So he's got 3 football teams. He bought the cycling team, Team Sky, and has rebranded them Ineos Grenadiers. Grenadiers being one of these newer businesses. So he's spent a lot of his time doing petrochemicals and being quite sort of boring and under the radar, earning lots of money. But more recently, he's done the sport. He's done this Grenadiers project, which is basically, again, one of his little kind of interests. Land Rovers. He wanted to sort of basically, do the Land Rover Defender again, a version of that, a 4x4 that he originally was thinking about building in Wales. He's now going to build it in France for tax and skills reasons. There's a different story. We can talk about that if you like. So Grenadiers is that sort of 4x4 project. He's got the sport going. He's like to do a bit of fashion, Belfort, an old British label. Again, he's interested in old British labels. The sport. So he's invested, he's sponsoring New Zealand All Blacks. He's bought a stake in Mercedes. He's really put a load of money into Ben Ainsley and trying to win the Emirates Cup sailing competition, which Britain have never done. So he's a guy that's made a load of money, and I think he's always liked sport. And I think for the last 5-6 years, he's thought, I'm going to put some of my money into sport.
It's like he's, most of us with kind of normal kind of money would get into cycling. You might buy a bike. He buys a cycling company. He's into F1. Yeah. We might buy Sky Sports F1 for a few months, and he buys an F1 team. Like, I know he hasn't bought the full F1 team.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, he's a rich bloke spending a lot of money on his hobbies by the sound of things. And, moving into the football realm a bit more specifically then. So Nice is the big one, obviously. 100 million was the reported fee for Nice, which is, you're looking at kind of Premier League club type money, obviously not United money, but that's a big deal for a big team that's often playing in Europe. So this is the most comparable to United. What has been the general kind of mood from Nice fans towards him? Is obviously they've got this slightly interesting, I wouldn't call it necessarily transfer policy, but the likes of Aaron Ramsey and Ross Barkley going there, Kasper Schmeichel as well. It's this kind of, almost taking players on the way out of the Premier League type model. Yeah. Looking at their finishes last season was they finished 5th, which is their best finish in 5 years, but it's not, radically better than they have been. It looks kind of more of the same. The one big difference I would say is looking at Nice since he took over, which was in 2019. Their spending in the sort of 4 or 5 previous transfer windows was 4 million in 2015-16, then 15 million the year after, 26 million the year after, 28 million. Then he takes over. The next window is 52 million. The one after that is 30 million, which again is the upper limit of what they were doing before. The one after that is then 55 million, and this season 81 million euros. So he's definitely spending a lot, or they are spending a lot more. What have you made of him, and what do sort of Nice fans make of him as a football owner?
Well, so there's a few things again to say there. So first, you're right. Nice are one of those teams that I think British fans think are bigger than they actually are. So they actually haven't won much since the 50s. And they spent a large part of the sort of 70s, 80s and 90s not being very good at all. The guy he bought the club from is quite interesting as well. Chen Li and Paul Conway. They're the guys that own Barnsley and sort of 7 or 8 other clubs. So Nice had already sort of moved into, and in fact they bought it from another American. So it's another American sort of investment group. So Nice has sort of been passed around by people trying to do football differently, if you know what I mean. So the Paul Conway, Shen Li guys were absolute early adopters of this multi-club model. And the money they made from Nice, they then invested in Ostend and Den Bosch. They just bought a Polish club. This stable of sort of second tier type clubs, and the idea it's all player trading. So Nice, they were already kind of a project sort of club for someone, and kind of an experiment. Ratcliffe bought them, I think, because he sort of saw value. I think he saw value in the French league, that the clubs are all cheap. This is often, you hear this quite a lot. And this sort of sense that it's a league that is very much trying to sort of drag itself up. It obviously has this dominant beast in PSG. A lot of the clubs are for sale at the moment. There was a sort of thought that PSG would help improve the TV deal, and it has to an extent. So there was sort of value. Don't forget, in my first answer, I talked about he has this eye for value, this sort of almost an obsession with value, which is no bad thing, right? If you're going to make $1 billion. So I think there was sort of good reason, and Nice have got a good stadium, nice spot, nice place to go watch football. So I think it was a sort of combination of value, opportunity. Someone's already started to do something a bit different with this club, and what I've sensed, and you're right, it's this last year is sort of the interesting year. I assumed that there would be more of this looking. Well, first thing about all French clubs is they have at their doorstep arguably the best sort of football talent factory around for the last few years. France is good at football. I'm not breaking any kind of scoops or exclusive, and they produce a lot of players. So I thought we'd get more of this big push on young French guys, Francophone African guys. The strength of the French league really as a selling league, and because he's in so many of other businesses. In fact, whenever he's talked about football, he's often sort of talked about the ridiculous sums of football, and he sort of said, "Oh, the Premier League's too expensive," and it's like it's a business I like watching, but I don't really understand because it's insane, right? And you hear that a lot from business people that kind of come at it and they sort of think it doesn't make sense as a business. And yet, what I've seen this year is more of that kind of, oh, right, well, you do actually have to speculate to accumulate. You do actually have to play the game. You do actually have to go buy players. And that last season was actually a really good season for Nice. You're right, they came fifth. They were right up it. They were sort of in a battle for fourth, third, right until the last few weeks. They also made the final of the French Cup. So it was probably their best season for a very long time. Actually, they lost the cup and they didn't quite get into the Champions League, but it was a good year. What's interesting is that then you're right, started buying. I won't say Premier League has-beens, but older Premier League players. Barkley's interesting. Ramsey, they obviously got him from Juve, but they've taken Nicolas Pepe on loan. You got, as you said, Kasper Schmeichel. I think Joe Bryan is on loan there from Fulham. And it seems a real departure from what I expected, and certainly what the Pacific Media Group guys were doing under Conway and Lee. This sort of shop window, go young. We are a selling club. Nice under recently appear to have gone this other way, and we shall see. We shall see. I think it's too early to judge. It's not going very well this season. It isn't. They're 10th. They've been kind of hovering around there all season. Lucien Favre, former Dortmund manager, who came back for a second spell. So last year they also had a good manager. They had Christophe Galtier, who's then gone to PSG off the back of a really good season for Nice. So they brought Favre back, and he got sacked. He got canned a few weeks ago. They went out of the French Cup. They lost to a third-tier team. It was obviously very embarrassing, and that was like the final straw. So his assistants running the show now, their results have picked up slightly, but they're treading water and they're way off. They're way off the European spots at the moment. So it's not been a good season, but is that enough data, right? So often, I end up talking to investors about football and sport, and they talk about data. Have we got enough to say it's useless and it's failing at Nice? I don't know if we have, because they bought the club. They were sort of like mid-table. Vieira was in charge. They sacked him. I think they came 5th, 9th, 5th last year, and it looks like they're going back to mid-table. So they've kind of been a bit, that's where they've been in League 1. But I would just make that important caveat at the beginning that Nice have not. That's not unusual for Nice.
Yeah.
Nice have not been a great club. Like I said, they haven't won the French title since the 50s. So that's that. I mean, and the club in Lausanne has been a sort of yo-yo club as well. He bought them as a yo-yo club, and that's how they remained. They got relegated, I think, in his second year under his ownership. But he then came back as champions. He built them a new stadium. They got relegated, I think it was last year or the year before, and they're sort of, they're vying for promotion this year. So yeah, if you just look at his clubs, there's nothing there to go, oh wow, this guy is dreadful, doesn't know what he's doing. But there's equally nothing there to say, my God, this guy's a football genius. And I think you're right to sort of identify that there does appear to have been a change of strategy at Nice to sort of go tried and tested, go, dare I say, expensive as well. So I'm intrigued by what's happened at Nice this year.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like you said, it's not like he's not been terrible by any means, but you've not gone, wow, this is, we must get this guy in. But then part of me doesn't necessarily want an owner that is, obviously I want someone that's successful, but I don't want an owner that is doing the football decisions anyway. I don't want him to come in and sort of twist things and move things around. What would be your expectation of him if he were to buy Manchester United? I mean, well, two questions. Firstly, do you think this interest is genuine? Do you think he can match the likes of Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Dubai that we're hearing reported interest from as well, and even the sort of American groups? Do you think he can match that financially and in terms of genuine interest? And secondly, is he a hands-on owner? Is he that kind of man that's going to come in and tell people what to do, or is he going to sort of let the business run as it is, do you think?
Well, really good questions. So, in no particular order, do I think the interest is genuine? Yes, I do. I think he wants to buy a Premier League club. I think he genuinely likes football, genuinely loves football. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's one of these guys, he's sometimes sort of described as really private and almost kind of reclusive. And yet it's actually not hard to find interviews with him. He does lots of internal stuff at Ineos. He does like kind of Q&As. You can find those on YouTube. So for a guy who's supposed to be really private and never talks, spend a bit of time, you'll find loads and loads of examples of him talking, and he actually answers questions. He's a pretty straightforward guy, and his interest in buying a Premier League club, I think, has been it's quite long standing now. It's at least 4 or 5 years, and the obvious one to talk about, of course, is Chelsea, because he has a place in Chelsea. I've mentioned the fact that Ineos's HQ's there. He's had a season ticket there, and I think he's been quite honest about it. Like, Manchester United was his boyhood club. There's another little story he sometimes tells about, I think his family moved to Hull when he was a youngster, and he used to sort of sell the lottery tickets at Hull. So he's got a Hull City story. His Chelsea story is more recent. He's got his place in Mayfair, and he goes to watch Chelsea play. All right, so that's the sort of story there at Chelsea. Chelsea, I think he's looked at that as, again, a sort of British brand, and he's thought London should have a really, really kind of mega club. Chelsea could be that club. And he's kicked the tires at Chelsea. And of course, when they genuinely were for sale last year in unusual circumstances, he did belatedly join the party. When people had sort of said, are you going to go in there? And he joined it way too late. And he joined it at a point where Todd Bowley had been basically, it had been the front runner for ages, because he had been talking to Abramovich for about 2-3 years, so he'd done a lot of the due diligence already. So yeah, it was a bit of a hiding to nothing there, and I did wonder, what was that really about? Was that sort of him sort of being kind of coerced into it, or sort of feeling like he should, or just I'll throw a late bit in there, and maybe Chelsea fans will go, British owner, blah blah blah. It didn't work. It didn't play out very well, frankly. But the interest in United, I think, has been there as well. And around the same time, or shortly after the Chelsea process was finished, he did say, look, I would like to buy United, but I don't think they're for sale. And I think there was a lot of truth in that Manchester United have been one of those clubs that aren't officially for sale, but have been in make me an offer territory for a while. If someone would walk through the door, where would the door be? Florida or the office in London, and say to the Glazers or the Glazers representatives, here's a great big check. All right. Yeah. Will you take it? They'd have taken it. Right. Certainly, some of the Glazer kids would have taken it. This is one of the reasons this is where we're at right now with the sale or strategic, whatever it is they're calling it. Is there alignment amongst the Glazer kids? So I think Ratcliffe has always wanted a Premier League club, would like it to be a really big one. But yeah, Manchester United would probably be his number one choice. If not there, Chelsea. It didn't work out at Chelsea. I think the issue to go on to, like, can he compete, is he has a very keen sense of value. So just remember that. I've said it a few times now.
Yeah.
He feels he's never overpaid. Doesn't overpay for stuff. I think as he's got a little bit older and he's got a bit richer and he's sort of thinking about his legacy and what's fun, I think he's got a bit more free with his cash. Otherwise, why on earth would you be involved in the America's Cup? I mean, that's just, insane. Yeah. But he's not going to, if the Glazers say, we think we're worth 5-6 billion, let's have an auction. Let's see where we end up. That's not for him. He will price Man United, and he'll do it very rigorously, and he'll have a number in mind, and he won't budge. I don't see him getting carried away. So you mentioned Saudi and Qatar, and whenever I've written various pieces about the sale process, and so have my colleagues. I keep coming back to this. How real is this interest from Qatar and Saudi, and what is it really? I know there's a large number of the people listening and watching this, and the fan base who keep jumping up and down and screaming at me. What am I on about? It's got to be Qatar, got to be Saudi. All right, then who and how? And where is this money? Where is this interest? How real is it? How credible is it? Can they get it over the line back at home? But can they get it over the line in terms of governance, in terms of owning the other stuff they own? We saw how long it took them to buy, Newcastle United. It's not as easy as that. It's not as easy as find me a sheikh, find me a sovereign wealth fund that isn't Qatar Sports Investments or isn't the Qatar Investment Agency, that isn't Public Investment Fund. It's hard, right? So what we've got with Radcliffe is that he's saying this time, I'm genuinely interested. It is for sale now. I'm speaking to Rain. I'm going through the front door this time properly. Rain are the bankers, as you know, that are overseeing the sale process. Here I am, and that's all we know at the moment. We don't know what the haggling is. We know that there are US. Well, I know, and I think others have sort of hinted at it strongly enough in their reporting, that there's US private equity that are interested as well. Do they want the whole lot? Don't think so. Will they take strategic stakes? 100%. Of course they will. They'd love to do that. And there'll be no shortage of US private money that would take 10-15%. That could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Will it be a full sale? And who can do a full sale? Ratcliffe can. Yeah. He won't overpay though. And that's where we get into the argument about what Man United are really worth.
Yeah.
And what Chelsea are worth, what Liverpool are worth. And did Bowley pay too much for Chelsea? That's when you get into a whole fascinating debate, and then how you benchmark them. Is Manchester United bigger, smaller, a better or worse investment than the Denver Broncos or the Washington Commanders? Because that's the territory where these guys are at now. They're looking at NFL teams, which have been sort of the gold standard sports franchise. They make money. There aren't many of them. People that have them hold on to them. One came onto the market last year. One's on the market now, right? So we are genuinely testing the market now for a gold standard premium ticket sports franchise. Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Big Six type clubs are in that bracket as well. But do you value them in the same way, on the same multiple of revenue? Are they a safer bet as those US sports franchises? Now, the answer traditionally has been no, they're not. They don't make money. There's a risk of relegation, which I agree is not really a risk for the big clubs at all. But they don't make much money. They just don't. So do you value them the same way? Increasingly, the answer is yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. So maybe Man United should be valued in a similar way to the Broncos. And if they are, yeah, then they're worth 5-6 billion. All right, and away you go. There's your price. If you don't quite value them in quite the same way, well, then it's more like 4 and a 5. And then I think maybe Radcliffe is interested. So that's where we're at.
Interesting, isn't it? It's a strange situation where, like you said, we all just sort of assume that there is this, Middle Eastern money coming in, and that would be the overwhelming favourite. And if they can sort of click the fingers and get this done, because you hear numbers like 2, 3, 4, 500 billion rather than 2, 3, 4 billion that you hear with Radcliffe. So you assume that that's just waiting in the wings, and as soon as this happens, they'll be there. But like you said, there hasn't been as far as I've seen, an official bid from anyone other than Radcliffe, or anyone making their presence sort of officially known, like you said. So that's an interesting point, actually. Just sort of finally then, I kind of asked you before, but we'll sort of come back to it. Do you think that he would be a good owner? And I know that that's such a broad term, and what does good owner mean? But someone that I think the main criteria for United fans would be someone that isn't trying to basically do this to show off. It feels like to me at least, and to people I speak to, that someone like Todd Burley's kind of, what he's doing there is almost like, look at me, I'm spending loads of money, rather than things being done in a sensible way. Treating Man United with a sort of, a respect almost that the Glazers haven't done. They've taken money out. They've sorted the debt around everything. It's all been about them and their money rather than the club. And clearing that debt, because obviously United are currently now in 560, 600 million quid's worth of debt.
Yeah.
Could that be something that Radcliffe gets rid of? Do you think he would be a good owner for United? Not doing it for himself, respecting the club and getting rid of that debt.
Yeah. So I'm not. I hold no candle for the man. I'm not a cheerleader for him. So I'm trying to be as neutral about these things as I can. And I went through all this with the Chelsea process as well, and Chelsea fans too. They ask similar questions. Here's what I think I know about Radcliffe. Proven track record, self-made man, loves football, loves sport, from the area, genuinely is interested in Britain, British brands, reviving British brands. Yeah, he's done some interesting things. Yes, Brexit, blah, 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 moving to Monaco. But he employs a lot of people here. He hasn't shifted many of his brands, many of his companies out of here, just the opposite, in fact. So there is a commitment to here. There's a commitment to doing something that's quite hard industry here. That's not easy. The whole way we've set up our economy, favouring the City of London and service industry and all that. So this is a guy who has a track record of backing Britain, backing British brands, wanting to succeed, wanting to win. Think about the sports teams he's invested in. Again, America's Cup, the pinnacle, Sir Ben Ainsley, our greatest sailor. He brought the best cycling team around. They won the Tour de France, Giro. They're not winning as many races as they used to, but that's just because it's a really competitive sport. They're still really good. All Blacks, the best rugby team. Mercedes, I know they're not winning right now, but that sport, cyclical. He's bought winners. He's associated himself with winners. The other sporting thing I didn't mention, again, but I talked about the fact he likes running. He backs a project to go sub 2 hours for a marathon. That was Eliud Kipchoge, and they actually pulled that one off. So he's a guy that likes challenges, that likes winning, sets himself a high bar. If I'm a fan, I'm quite liking what I'm hearing at the moment. Backs people, will spend, wants to win. Then I would compare him to the current lot. Now, again, I'm not cheerleading for Ratcliffe, I'm not cheerleading for anyone. I'll join the booing chorus for the Glazers, though. The Glazers are terrible owners, dreadful owners. Is he better than them? Yes, he is. Because I don't think he'll take a dividend out of the club. That never ceases to. I always sort of. I mean, that is. We can talk about the purchase debt and how that sat there and was it relevant or not. There's a debate and an argument to have about that. Sound business people will tell you that's not really the big issue. Don't worry about it. I don't know many people will go, but they take dividends out. They're the only people that do that in football. So they have used the club like a cash machine, and they have been very mediocre. So the defense of them would be, oh yeah, but they bring American business know-how, and they have that relationship with American sponsors and what have you, and the listing on the New York Stock Exchange enabled them to tap into blah, 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 blah. I hear this all the time. And then I look at the fact that Manchester United 10, 15 years ago were up here, right, commercially, streets ahead of everybody else, used to top the Deloitte money list. Yeah. And now they're here. They're still good. They're still big. They're not Man United anymore, but they're not what they were. And that's on the Glazers' watch. Right? So all the metrics are going the wrong direction. They're still good, but they're going in the wrong direction. So that's on their watch. They're not very good commercially, despite what you poor Man United fans have been told. So is he better than that lot? Yeah, I think he is. I think he is. Does that mean he's going to be an amazing owner? Does that mean he's going to return you to your perch and you're going to buy the young Ronaldo and Pogba's, and well, that's not a good example, but you're going to be shopping at that end of the market, really? Right? Yeah, exactly. Is he? I don't know. But he's going to be better than the current lot. I'm very confident of that. I don't know what his style will be, because like I was saying in the previous answer, what he's doing at Nice has confused me a bit. Yeah. It's a little bit counterintuitive to what I was expecting him to do. The things that are probably worth adding are, look at the people who he's kind of trusting and working with. So for a time, his brother Bob, who doesn't say much at all, was sort of running the football clubs. He's kind of eased him aside a bit, which sort of shows a ruthlessness. And he's about to hire a very respected French guy called Jean-Claude Blanc, who previously worked at PSG and Juventus as well, I think, to be the sort of executive and be the sort of chief exec of his football clubs. Yeah. I think that's an interesting appointment. He hasn't started. I think he starts in March. I don't know him very well. He's very highly regarded, though, and it was considered to be a good hire. And he's leaning on for advice, kind of high performance advice across all his sports endeavours on Sir Dave Brailsford. And that's a name that was very, very big in British sport a few years ago. He's the guy that came through British cycling, made British cycling really good, runs Team Sky. His star has fallen a little bit because Team Sky got into all kinds of, I don't want to turn this into a cycling podcast, or doping issues there, and has basically taken a bit of a back seat. But, I've had my issues with him. I used to cover cycling, and the guy 10 years ago was the sort of high performance guru. Everyone was copying what Team Sky and British Cycling were doing. So he knows how to win. Marginal gains was his big idea. It wasn't necessarily his idea, but he certainly championed it. So these are the people that Radcliffe trusts, the guys that Radcliffe talks to. I think applying a bit of that high performance nous, that Olympic, attention to detail, the best of everything. Team Sky, if you look at Team Sky under Brailsford, highest budget, they went out and bought the best young riders. They surrounded them with the best coaches. They did things a bit differently. They targeted the biggest race, Tour de France, and they won again and again and again and again. Right? If I'm a Manchester United fan and I'm looking for clues, I'm quite liking that. I'm thinking that sounds quite good to me. We're that sort of brand. We're that club. We should only ever be thinking about winning. Now, have the Glazers only ever thought about winning?
I don't think they've thought about it once yet. Actually, I don't think it's even crossed their mind winning. The dividends, they like the dividends, but the winning stuff is, sort of that's secondary. I think Woodward said it. He said, "Man United don't need to win trophies to make money." And like you said, we're seeing that actually you do at some point. You can't keep slipping down and just becoming the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th biggest club in the world. United need to be at the top, and hopefully Jim Ratcliffe will bring that mentality and that that sort of ethos. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Thank you for bringing us that insight, the full sort of deep dive on Jim Ratcliffe there, who he is as a man, his previous transactions, his history as a businessman, and what he could potentially bring to Manchester United. That's again, thank you for that. Make sure you check out the full article that Matt wrote in The Athletic. The link to that is in the description. Thank you to everyone for joining us at home. Make sure you like the video. Leave your comments, your thoughts on Jim Radcliffe and any potential new owners for Manchester United. This has been a one-on-one interview talking about Jim Radcliffe, the potential new owner of Manchester United. We'll see you in a bit.